Ever had the police show up just because you were fixing your own dock? Not trespassing? Not throwing a party just? Tightening a loose plank with a wrench end? Suddenly flashing lights? Holsters? The whole dramatic scene. One woman from the HOA accused me of unlawfully occupying shared land. Shared with whom? The ducks. Then out popped her clipboard-carrying sidekick from behind some bushes, recording me like I was hiding a body. I stood there wondering, is this real? Or some bizarre comedy sketch about suburban life? Things unraveled fast from that moment on. Ever had someone try to rewrite your whole life over a strip of land? Drop your stories in the comments. My name's Clark, and I was 50 when this happened. Thin-framed, as folks would say, but my late wife always said I had sharp eyes that could sniff out trouble before it arrived. Maybe that's why I worked for years as a property consultant, combing through contracts word for word to make sure no one got taken advantage of by sneaky fine print. These days, I just wanted peace-fishing books and time by the lake. Quiet, uncomplicated life. After decades of sorting out other people's land squabbles, I figured I'd earned that. But peace doesn't last long, not when someone like Francine Vaughn is involved. Francine, head of the HOA, treated power like it was a perfume she couldn't stop spraying. She always had this look, like the whole planet owed her something. And maybe that's exactly how she felt, because from the second I moved into this lakeside community, she seemed to take my independence as a personal attack on her authority. Why she singled me out? I'm still not sure. Maybe because I didn't show up to HOA meetings with a notepad and fake enthusiasm like some of the other folks. At first, it was minor annoyances, those petty little comments that make you wonder if you're imagining things. Your grass is a tad long, Clark. Your dog seems noisy lately. Maybe park your truck straighter. Sticky notes appeared on my mailbox weekly, each one signed in her flawless cursive. I brushed it off, assuming she'd get bored and pick on someone else. After all, my grass was barely an inch past the limit, and my dog didn't bark unless someone came up to the house. But Francine acted like I was running a scrapyard in Beverly Hills. Then she came for the dock, the same one my father built. In 1965, from timber he dragged down from the mountains. Sure, it had a few worn boards and rusty bolts, but it held 60 years of family memories. That dock was where I learned to fish, proposed to my wife, and watched countless sunsets turn the lake gold. It was my last real connection to my dad, who passed a decade ago. And Francine knew that Ty told her the story once, back when she first moved in and almost seemed like a normal person. Then the warning letters came in like junk mail after buying a car. Official HOA letters, certified, demanding immediate removal of the dock due to aesthetic violations and impacting property values. I'd sit at the kitchen table reading them, skin-crawling not from the legal language, but from the vindictive tone. It wasn't about community standards. It was personal. The final straw came on a clear afternoon when I was tightening a couple of wobbly planks on the dock. I prefer fixing problems instead of ignoring them, so I grabbed my tools and got to work. That's when I noticed someone lurking behind the Trezan HOA security guard, snapping photos on his phone like he was collecting evidence for a felony. He was crouched, trying not to be seen, fully committed to his spy act. When he realized I saw him, he jumped like I fired a gun, dropped his phone in the pine needles, and ran off like a kid caught raiding the cookie jar. I stood there holding a hammer, watching him dash away, shaking my head. So, this was the new game. What unsettled me most wasn't his sneaking around. It was the look on his face. It wasn't just someone doing a job. It felt personal, like he had a score to settle. Maybe Francine had been whispering tales about how I was the community menace. Who knows? But his expression told me one thing: this was just beginning. That evening, I pulled out my dad's old paperwork, deeds, tax forms, survey maps. One map caught my eye. It showed my dock completely outside the HOA boundaries. There was also something about leased land that didn't make sense yet, but seemed important. I spread everything across my dining table, trying to decode it. Something crucial was there, something that could either rescue me or blow up in my face, and I didn't know which. I started wondering if I was truly the one under threat, or if I held the key to flipping this entire situation. Was this my chance, or a dangerous trap? 3 days later, I received the HOA's final threat to remove the dock in 7 days or face legal action. I read it twice, but instead of fear, I felt something I hadn't in years: The fire I had back when I was a property consultant. I wasn't about to roll over. Instead of replying formally, I picked up the phone and invited the entire HOA board to my place for coffee and a friendly chat. Francine's voice on the phone was thick with smugness. She thought I was surrendering, ready to beg for mercy, maybe. Offer a deal, of course. Clark, she cooed. We're always reasonable with those who approach us respectfully. I nearly laughed. She had no idea. The meeting was like watching amateur theater. Francine sat like royalty, passing judgment, flanked by two board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She kept checking her watch, waiting for me twofold. I calmly sipped my coffee, letting her run her mouth. Francine delivered a pompous speech laced with HOA, jargon about setting enforcement, precedents, and protecting property values. But after 20 years in property law, I could see the truth beneath her words. I don't like you or your doc, and I'm going to bully you until you do what I want. All dressed up in legal-sounding nonsense. The other board members, forgettable. They nodded along like dashboard bobbleheads. I wanted to ask if they even read the HOA charter or just came for free donuts, but I let Francine dig herself deeper. Then she brought out her evidence, a stack of neighbor complaints about the dock. She laid them out on my table like playing poker with a royal flush. Safety hazard, eyesore, doesn't match the neighborhood itch. But something caught my eye. All the complaints had the same font, format, and even similar signatures. I leaned in and said, Francine, these seem to come from the same source. Like one person wrote them all and just swapped names. Her face turned red and she fumbled to collect the papers. That's irrelevant, she stammered. The concerns are valid, regardless of presentation. That's when I knew she wasn't just zealous, she was willing to fake evidence. The room went silent. Her board looked anywhere but at me. Time for my own reveal, not the big one, just a teaser. I pulled out a photo of my dad fishing on that dock decades ago, long before the HOA existed. Mrs. Vaughn, I said, this dock was built before your HOA, before the homes, before the roads. Francine's jaw worked silently, trying to form a comeback. Finally, she sputtered, current rules apply, regardless of age. Grandfather clauses don't matter when safety's involved. I had to admire her sticking to a sinking ship. Mrs. Vaughn, I said, meeting her eyes, you might want to review property law before making threats you can't support. As they left, muttering about legal action, I caught a glimpse in Francine's eyes, something colder than anger. She wasn't finished, and I realized I was about to see just how far she'd go to win. I didn't expect her next move a hazmat. Crew blocked my driveway under emergency orders. The foreman handed me stamped HOA papers, claiming contaminated soil. Meanwhile, fish leaped in the crystal-clear lake behind him. Contaminated? I asked, gesturing at the pristine water. What's the danger, happy ducks? My sarcasm hit its mark. The crew looked uneasy. The foreman, clearly skeptical now, read the paperwork again, frowning at the mismatch between claim and reality. 10 minutes later, they packed up and left. No cleanup, no explanation. But Francine wasn't done. 2 days later, I returned from shopping to find my power and water shut off. No notice. Just 1850 living. I watched an electrician cut my service and flee when he saw me. Turns out, Francine's lawyer threatened the utility companies into cooperating. Ate a cold sandwich by candlelight and thought about giving up. I'd lost my wife to cancer 2 years ago. Was this fight worth it? Maybe I should sell, take the memories, and retire somewhere peaceful. But I heard my dad's voice, clear as day. Never let bullies win. They'll just move on to the next victim. He'd stood up to his fair share of bully-corrupt contractors, shady partners, HOA tyrants. Backing down only teaches them to keep pushing. That's when I stopped playing defense. I scribbled a note, research HOA, land lease, and called my old friend Russell, a municipal land law expert who owed me a favor. Clark, he boomed, still fishing from that legendary dock. I explained everything: harassment, false emergencies, utilities cut. Russell listened, then laughed. Clark, you genius. Did you know HOAs usually lease common land from the city? Those leases have penalties and adjustment clauses. I nearly dropped the phone. Years in property law, and I never looked at the HOA's lease angle. You mean, I started, but Russell was ahead of me. You might be sitting on the nuclear option and not even know it. The words kept circling in my mind, sitting there under the beam of a flashlight, staring at those heavy legal papers. One thought gnawed at me. Was I about to start a battle I had no chance of winning? I didn't know if I was being brave or foolish, but one thing was certain: I couldn't just sit back in the dark and let her erase my family's legacy. The real question was whether I had the nerve to unleash whatever legal hammer Russell believed I might be holding. Exactly 7 days after my talk with Russell, the moment of truth arrived. I swear I had never felt such a strange mix of calm, confidence, and absolute dread in my life. That morning, I was out fishing off my dock, sipping hot coffee in the cool air, when the blare of sirens ripped through the quiet like gunfire. 2 squad cars rolled into my driveway, immediately followed by Francine's unmistakable white SUV. She stepped out like a celebrity, making her red carpet debut, practically radiating smugness as she stood behind the officers, orchestrating the scene like a director calling the shots. Officer Miller approached carefully, a man in his 30s, decent looking, but with weary eyes that told me he'd seen more than his fair share of neighborhood drama. His cautious body language made it clear he wasn't thrilled to be here, but was determined to handle it by the book. "Mr. Clark," he called out, in that measured tone cops use when they're trying to determine if they're walking into danger, or just another neighborly spat. "We've received a complaint from the HOA regarding unlawful occupation of common property and disturbing the peace." I gently placed my fishing rod down and gave him a steady smile, though inside my chest felt like a drum line. "Officers, why don't you come up to the house? I think this will take a little time to explain properly. There are documents you'll want to see before any hasty decisions are made." Officer Miller nodded, motioning for his partner to follow. Francine quickly tagged along, desperate not to miss a word of what was about to unfold. Inside, Francine wasted no time unloading her evidence as if she were prosecuting a high-profile criminal case. She portrayed me as a dangerous squatter, wrecking property values and terrorizing peaceful residents. With my blatant disregard for community norms, she had everything cataloged and ready, the arsenal she'd been building for weeks. "This man," she declared, flailing her arms like she was at the Supreme Court, "has repeatedly disobeyed lawful directives issued by the Homeowners Association. He's allowed his property to become a blight, violated numerous community bylaws, and created a hostile atmosphere for residents who just want peace." I had to grip the arms of my chair to keep from bursting into laughter roar. One slip of the tongue, one flash of anger, and everything I'd spent the last week preparing could unravel. Officer Miller scribbled in his notepad. His partner examined Francine's photos, both of them clearly trying to figure out what law I'd supposedly broken. Fishing on land I'd owned for decades, unlawful occupation of property I'd inherited. The absurdity was almost laughable, and I actually felt a twinge of sympathy for these officers forced to waste their time on this nonsense. When Francine finally ran out of steam and took a seat, oozing self-satisfaction, I calmly opened the 2 folders I'd prepared the night before. "Officers," I said, "you've heard her side. Let me show you mine end, then you can decide what's really happening." I flipped open the first folder. Inside was a thick stack of documents, dating back to 1965. Original deeds, survey maps, tax statements, even vintage photos of my father building the dock himself. "This dock was here before the neighborhood even had roads," I said, laying the papers on the coffee table for everyone to see. "It's private property, and always has been." These records prove the dock's history and its separation from any HOA authority. Officer Miller's posture changed. He leaned closer, scanning the papers intently. His partner joined him, both now clearly realizing they'd been summoned on a fool's errand. Then I opened the second, thinner folder, and this is where things got interesting. "This," I said, "is the HOA's land lease agreement with the county. Section 3C clearly states that if the HOA abuses its power or harasses residents, those residents can petition for immediate fee adjustments." I handed Miller the highlighted section. "Last night, at exactly 11:47 p.m. minus 13 minutes after Unocti filed that petition with the county clerk." Francine's smug look vanished in an instant. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice stripped of all authority. She looked like someone who'd just realized she'd been playing poker with a professional and had gone Elin with a losing hand. "What petition? What adjustment?" At that very moment, Officer Miller's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his whole demeanor shifted. "Mrs. Vaughn," he said slowly, "I just got an alert from county administration about your organization's lease." Francine lunged for the phone, as if she could erase the message by reading it. Miller politely pulled it away. "It states your annual land lease has been adjusted effective immediately. A 700% increase, citing breach of community trust." Then I dropped the hammer. The petition I filed increased the HOA's annual fee from $12,000 to $84,000 effective now. The silence was deafening. Even Francine seemed to stop breathing. Miller stared at me like I'd just revealed I was CIA, while his partner frantically flipped through the documents to verify if it was even possible. I turned to Francine. "This isn't revenge, it's accountability. The kind your HOA has forgotten. The county has rules for when associations overstepped in. I've used them." Miller shut his notebook and stood up. "Mr. Clark, you appear to be on your own land with valid documentation. Any disputes over fees and community governance are civil matters for the county." He turned to Francine with a look reserved for time wasters. "Ma'am, I suggest you consult legal counsel and stop involving law enforcement in civil disputes." As the patrol cars drove off and I watched Francine's stunned expression crumble, I realized I'd just fired the opening shot in a much bigger war. But seeing her humiliated, I couldn't help but wondered, did I have enough ammunition for what was coming next? Because a woman who fakes emergencies and cuts off utilities wouldn't back down easily. How far would she go for revenge? Francine wasn't done, and honestly, I should have known better than to think she'd walk away. Someone who staged phony complaints and environmental crises wasn't going to retreat just because she lost once for the next week. She practically moved into the HOA office emergency meetings, frantic calls, and a pricey lawyer who immediately sent me a threatening letter. I read that letter over breakfast, shaking my head. Harassment, extortion, malicious interference, you name it. Every scare tactic dressed in fancy legal jargon designed to make me cave. But after 2 decades in property law, I could see through the fluff. That letter had about as much legal weight as a chocolate teapot. "Throwing good money after bad," I muttered, tossing it into the drawer with the rest of her empty threats. But then the texts from neighbors started coming in. And that's when I realized Francine's counterattack might be working. Rumors spread like wildfire. People I thought were friends treated me like I was the villain. Each message hit harder than the last. For the first time, I wondered, had I gone too far? Was the 700% increase too much? Had I crossed from defending myself into pettiness? I couldn't sleep. Doubts gnawed at me. Maybe I should have just left, like Francine wanted. Maybe I was just a stubborn old man who didn't know when to walk away. Even the guy who once offered to help fix my dock now avoided me in the grocery store. Then came Francine's big community meeting. I had 2 choices: face the music or let her control the story. I went, even though walking into that room felt like stepping into a lion's den. Nearly 100 people stared me down, most of them glaring. Francine took the podium, playing the desperate politician. Charts, graphs, doom and gloom. My fee increase would bankrupt the community, cancel the pool, the holiday party, maybe even dissolve the HOA. She made it sound like I was single-handedly destroying suburbia. "This man," she pointed at me, "is holding us hostage for personal revenge." The room murmured in agreement. People nodded. I sat in the back, gripping my evidence, ready to walk away. I could be fishing in Montana by next weekend, but then I thought about my dad, about every bully who counts on people backing down. She finally asked for comments. Silence fell. I stood up. "Evening," I said. "Mrs. Vaughn wants me to explain. So here I am." I laid out my documents same as I showed the police. She's right, I requested a fee hike. What she didn't say is why. Section 3C, harassment, abuse of power. That's what forced my hand. Then I revealed my ace. I didn't come to defend myself. I came to reveal the truth. If you're worried about fees destroying the HOA, here's my solution. We hold a vote of no confidence and elect people who understand the law and won't waste our resources. The room exploded. Murmurs turned to claps, then cheers. People were shouting new board member names, but Francine's face was pure hate. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Soon, everything unraveled. Neighbors demanded records, Meetings turned hostile. Francine's online rants and late-night emails only made her look more desperate. Then came the call that changed it all. Stuart Morrison, a meticulous former board member, showed up at my door. Trembling with anger, "I can't stay silent," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside, dash proof, receipts, statements. Staring at the receipts scattered across my kitchen table, I felt no anger, just a cold, sinking sense of inevitability, like watching a dam burst after years of warning people it was coming. She honestly believed no one would ever bother to check, didn't she? I turned to Stuart, who was locked on the pile of evidence, clearly shaken by what he'd unknowingly helped conceal through his silence. "I should have spoken up years ago," he confessed, but she was so forceful, so confident. I kept thinking there had to be explanations I wasn't seeing. I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt until the truth became too obvious to ignore. It covered everything, not just the financial misconduct, but also a timeline revealing how Francine's hostility toward me had escalated the moment. I dared to challenge her authority. The pattern became glaringly obvious when laid out chronologically. Every single time someone questioned her or pushed back, they became a target, harassed, bullied, and intimidated. I wasn't her first victim. I was just the first who fought back and refused to be run off. I made copies of every document, bundling them into packets for every household in the neighborhood. I also sent copies to the local paper and the county prosecutor. No theatrics, no shouting match, just plain facts, clearly organized, so people could draw their own conclusions. Sometimes truth hits harder than any argument. I trusted the evidence to do what no speech ever could. By morning, it was like a scene straight out of a movie. Cars jammed the street outside the HOA office. Furious residents clutched copies of my report, demanding answers, many pointing to specific receipts and questioning certain expenses. Inside, Francine had locked herself in, her shadow darting back and forth behind the closed blinds like a panicked animal. Every few minutes, someone banged on the door demanding she come out, but she wasn't letting anyone in. By noon, the board called an emergency session. That evening, a vote was held. Unsurprisingly, the outcome wasn't even close, 47-2. Only Francine and one diehard supporter opposed. Just like that, Francine Vaughn was ousted, stripped of her authority, banned from representing the HOA in any capacity. Effective immediately, she carried a single box to her car under the watchful eyes of at least a dozen neighbors. Inside that box, a rattling stapler, crumpled flyers, and whatever was left of her reign. But as she backed out of the lot, she glanced at me through the windshield, not broken or remorseful, but calculating. It was the look of someone already scheming. I had won this battle, but something told me Francine wasn't the type to slink away quietly. What could she possibly do now? Her official power was gone, the community had turned on her, and the vote wasn't even close. Even those 2 votes in her favor likely came from people stuck in old habits, not genuine loyalty. That same evening, she cleared out her office. Half the neighborhood stood on porches and behind windows, watching the once all-powerful HOA, Queen reduced to just another resident facing the fallout of her choices. The new board offered me a formal advisory role, but I turned it down with a smile. "Thanks, but I'd rather spend my time fishing," I told them, and I meant it. I gave them a few words of advice, though. Be transparent, actually read the rules before making threats, and treat residents like people, not like subjects in a kingdom. After that, I returned to my peaceful routine of morning coffee. The quiet that followed felt too calm, like the eerie stillness predators loved before. Striking again. But then something unexpected happened. The new HOA leadership officially acknowledged my dock as private property and even issued a formal apology right on the dock. Francine once tried to erase. She vanished after that. More ominous letters. No more late-night drive-bys. No more intimidation. Life finally seemed to return to normal, and for the first time in a long while, I believed the nightmare was over. In hindsight, I should have known better. Francine wasn't the kind to simply accept defeat and move on. That realization hit hard one Tuesday morning as I sipped coffee, watching the sunrise glisten over the lake. My phone rang. It was Russell. He didn't waste time. I grabbed the remote, expecting maybe a segment on HOA reform. Instead, I nearly dropped my coffee. There was Francine's mug, mascara, drained expression, and all. The charges: embezzlement, abuse of public trust, falsifying police reports, and harassment. But the real shocker: the county prosecutor had been quietly building a case against her for months, triggered by complaints from multiple neighborhoods. His voice filled with satisfaction. "You weren't her first victim, Clark, just the first, who fought back effectively." Apparently, Francine's pattern was predictable. Join a board, grab power, and use it for personal vendettas and financial gain? 3 communities had filed complaints over the past 5 years, but none had the ironclad evidence I had managed to collect. But the biggest twist? Honored the 700% lease fee increase I had legally requested. It was meant to demonstrate that they wouldn't brush past misconduct under the rug. What they didn't expect was how devastating that would be. With Francine's embezzlement, draining resources, and legal fees piling up from her harassment cases, the increased payments tipped the scales. The HOA couldn't cover its costs. Even with optimistic forecasts and deep budget cuts, they couldn't stay afloat. In the end, they had no choice. The HOA voted to dissolve itself unanimously. The old clubhouse, once a symbol of control, became a picnic shelter. The gated pool, now open to all, filled with laughter. Everything was turned into a public park, county-funded and free for everyone. No more rules about grass length or dog breeds. No more power-hungry boards issuing arbitrary demands. Just a lakeside retreat where people could live freely without clipboard dictators ruining their peace every morning. I'm still here on my dock, casting into the same waters where my father once taught me to fish. Weekends are lively now, picnicking where the clubhouse once stood, kids swimming in the pool, and people walking their dogs without fear of some HOA enforcer, nitpicking leash lengths. Some former neighbors who once blamed me now wave and smile, realizing that in the end, we all won. A local newspaper ran a piece about HOA abuse and community resilience. It caught national attention. Some lawyers even dubbed it the Clark Doctrine, using an HOA's own rules to hold them accountable. I've since received emails from people across the country asking how to stand up to their own version of Francine. My advice is always the same. Read the fine print. Know your rights. Document everything. And never let fear silence you. A widow from Texas told me her HOA was trying to remove her late husband's memorial garden. A veteran in Oregon faced harassment over his service dog. Their stories reminded me that Francines are everywhere, hiding behind clipboards and rules. Counting on good people to stay quiet, Francine received 18 months in county jail and had to repay every dime she stole. Even more importantly, her case led to state law changes, better financial oversight for HOAs, clearer resident appeals, and real penalties for board misconduct. Sometimes it takes a bold example to force change. My dock dispute became that. Spark. Because a dock isn't just planks and bolts. It's legacy. It's defiance. It's the kind of stand that can dismantle a kingdom built on fear. The best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's being smarter. I just wanted to protect my dock and live in peace. But by standing up to one bully, I protected countless others she might have targeted next. Now, as I sit here telling you this story, watching ducks glide across the lake, I wonder if you were in my shoes. Would you have stood your ground or walked away? Bullies count on silence. But sometimes, standing firm changes everything. If you've ever taken a stand when it would have been easier to run, I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments. And if this resonated with you, there's a little thanks button down below. Thanks for sticking with me. Catch you next time.